Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Could you keep a secret powerful enough to destroy your family and your marriage? Today's story shows how a decision made in youth can return years later, just when everything seems perfect. Stay until the end, because the truth Cristina has hidden could change everyone's life. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us in the comments, would you reveal the truth, or would you keep the secret to protect your family? Now, prepare your heart, because this is a story about love, guilt, and a secret that should never have come to light. Sometime after my parents separated, since we were already close to the end of the year, my mother decided to spend a few days at my grandmother's house in the countryside. She was very sad, poor thing, and completely discouraged with life. It was not only because of the separation, but mainly because of the way everything had happened. My mother discovered that my father had been cheating on her, and in the end, he decided to leave home to be with the other woman. It was a terrible blow to her. In fact, it did not affect only my mother. I suffered deeply too. I was devastated because I had never expected something like that from him. It was an enormous disappointment. Despite all the pain, my mother had no choice but to try to move forward. My father had been gone for about 3 months when she decided to spend the end-of-year holidays at my grandmother's house in Bandeirantes, hoping that a change of scenery might help. At the time, I was 17 years old. I also had a job, but I managed to take a few days off so I could travel with her. It had probably been about 5 years since my last visit. And naturally, I missed my grandmother very much. We had several relatives living in Bandeirantes, uncles, aunts, and many cousins. It was wonderful to see everyone again. However, there was one cousin in particular, Wagner, who affected me in a way that, let us say, was not exactly appropriate. The last time we had seen each other had been about 5 years earlier. During that previous visit, we had already exchanged a few unusual glances, the kind cousins do not normally share. Everything was very discreet, of course, but only I knew how I felt whenever he looked at me. We were almost the same age. He must have been 17 or 18 at most. After a while we were talking outside near the gate, he said, "Wow, Cristina, you have changed so much. You look completely different." "Different? What do you mean?" "I don't know. You are prettier now. More grown up." Those words had an effect on me that I still cannot explain, especially because of the way he looked at me. To be fair, he had said I looked prettier and more mature. That was only natural. 5 years earlier, when we had last seen each other, I had been only 12. Of course I had changed. At that age, I was still practically a child. The truth was that an attraction developed between us. That same night, we went for a walk nearby. Since we were alone, we ended up kissing. It was an intense kiss. I know it may sound strange for two cousins to become involved, but these things sometimes happen. We had not seen each other for so long that it almost felt as though we were strangers, as though we had only just met. In the end, it seemed inevitable. It was not love. It was simply a very strong attraction, a desire to hold and kiss each other. Neither of us resisted it. My mother and I stayed in Bandeirantes for 10 days. During that time, Wagner and I met several more times. On one of those occasions, just one day before we returned home, our relationship went beyond kissing, and we became intimate. For me, it was an intense and deeply emotional moment, unlike anything I had ever experienced. Even today, when I close my eyes, it sometimes feels as if I am reliving that moment. Naturally, nobody knew what had happened, unless Wagner said something after we left, which I do not believe he did. We had talked, and I asked him to keep it a secret. I did not want it to become gossip among our relatives, and I was also afraid of how my mother would react. At first, I will not lie, I missed him terribly. During those 10 days, we had seen each other almost every day. When I returned home, the longing began to weigh heavily on my heart. Then, as usually happens with holiday romances, I slowly became used to the distance. Life moved on, and everything seemed to return to normal. At least, that was what I believed until I faced a situation that had never been part of my plans. A brief romance like that usually hurts at first, especially when the other person is far away. You miss them, you feel lonely, and you may even believe that you are in love. But normally, those feelings fade with time. In my case, they didn't fade. They didn't fade because a short time later, I discovered that I was pregnant. It was a terrible shock. The father of the child could only be Wagner. My life turned into a real nightmare. I hid the pregnancy from my mother for as long as I could. Eventually, however, there was no way to conceal it. My stomach began to grow, and the symptoms became impossible to ignore. When my mother found out, she was furious with me. She was deeply upset. I do not even like remembering everything she said. She called me irresponsible and told me that by then I should already have been receiving medical care. I pretended I had not known either. I told her that I had only just discovered the pregnancy. But even that did not make things easier. I remember her saying, "I only want to see what happens when your father finds out. He's going to be furious with you, Cristina." Naturally, my mother wanted to know who the father was. I lied. I told her it had been a young man I'd gone out with a few times, and that I had no way of finding him. I said I did not have his phone number, and that he had disappeared. It was all a lie. It had not been a stranger. It had been my cousin. Wagner was the only person with whom I had ever been involved that way. Even so, I did not want to bring him into the situation. I was afraid of everyone's reaction. My parents, the rest of the family, and even Wagner himself. I know I was irresponsible. I should have told the truth from the beginning. But I continued to support that false version of events. My father was also furious when he learned about the pregnancy. But what could he do besides argue with me? He also called me irresponsible. At one point, I lost my patience and confronted him. I said something I perhaps should not have said, but I was desperate. While he was shouting at me, I reached a point where I could no longer bear it. "After what you did to my mother, Dad, you have no right to judge me." He stared at me in shock, as though he could not believe I had dared to speak to him that way. It was an extremely difficult period. I had made a mistake that I could have avoided, but I had not avoided it. By then, there was no point in regretting it, because I could not turn back time and undo what had happened. My life changed completely because of the pregnancy. I had many more responsibilities, but I never refused to face them. I did everything within my power. Sometimes, alone in the silence of my room, I would think about everything and torment myself. Many times I cried. I often concluded that the best thing would be to tell everyone the truth and admit that my son's father was my cousin. But every time, my courage disappeared. Once I almost told my mother everything, but I changed my mind at the last moment. I imagined what everyone would say if they discovered that I had become pregnant by my own cousin. I was already being judged simply because I was an unmarried mother. The judgment would be infinitely worse if everyone knew the complete truth. So I decided to remain silent, accept the responsibility, and raise my child. Well, not entirely alone. I had support from my mother and even from my father, although they were both deeply disappointed in me. Fortunately, my son was born healthy. I struggled through life, but little by little, things began to improve. When Gabriel turned 2, I found a place for him at a daycare center and returned to work. It was at that company that I met Bernardo. I can honestly say it was love at first sight. We looked at each other and immediately felt something special. Soon, we began dating. I never hid from Bernardo that I had a young son and was a single mother. He did not mind at all. The only thing I hid was the truth about Gabriel's father. In fact, I had never told anyone in my family. I repeated to Bernardo the same story I had told everyone else. I said Gabriel's father was a man I barely knew, someone I had gone out with twice, and that he had disappeared after learning about the pregnancy. I never imagined the truth could come to light or create a problem. That was why I continued to maintain the lie I had invented. Our relationship became more serious with each passing month. The feelings that had begun the first time we met continued to grow. When we were close to completing 1 year and 8 months together, Bernardo suggested that we move in together. I was deeply in love and did not hesitate to say yes. From the very beginning, Bernardo treated me with great tenderness. By his side, I felt like a princess. And he did not reserve that kindness only for me. He also treated Gabriel with tremendous love. For a single mother, that means everything. I would become emotional watching him play with my son. From the start, Bernardo acted as though he were Gabriel's father. Our plan was to find a little place for the 3 of us. However, when my mother learned what we were planning, she insisted that we continue living with her. "Are you really planning to leave me here all alone? I cannot believe this." I will not lie, I felt sorry for her. My mother had become very used to having us there, especially her grandson, since Bernardo got along very well with her. We talked and decided to remain in the house, at least for a while longer. So Bernardo moved in with us. 3 or 4 months later, he prepared a surprise. He took all of us out to dinner. Me, my mother, Gabriel, and even his parents. During dinner, he asked me to marry him. He had already bought the rings. Bernardo had wanted my father to be there too. However, because of everything my father had done, we decided not to invite him. My mother could not stand the woman for whom he had abandoned us, and if he had been invited, he almost certainly would have brought her. Later, Bernardo spoke to my father about his intentions, and everything was settled. It was a perfect night. I do not think I had ever been so happy. We had a simple civil wedding, and to our great joy, a few months later, I became pregnant again. Bernardo was so happy that he nearly cried. He looked like a child receiving the toy he had always wanted. Sometime later, he surprised me again. "Cristina, I want to ask you something. I would like to legally register Gabriel as my son. Would you allow me to do that?" My God. He wanted to put his own name on Gabriel's birth certificate. After learning that we were going to have another child, Bernardo offered to legally take responsibility for the boy I had given birth to before meeting him. By that point, I barely thought about Wagner anymore. I swear I had almost forgotten him. Then Bernardo stood before me and offered to become the legal father of the child I had conceived with my cousin. I did not merely agree. I was overwhelmed by the goodness of that man. I cried, but they were tears of happiness. My mother was also deeply moved. It was in the middle of all that happiness that something happened, which I had never imagined. We received a visit from Aunt Nide, none other than Wagner's mother. I did not know she was coming. I do not think my mother knew either. I was completely shaken when I saw her standing there, and everything became even more frightening when she met Gabriel. I was 7 months pregnant with my second child, and the shock was so strong that I thought I might go into labor. Aunt Nade began looking at Gabriel in a strange way. She studied every detail of his face, reacted with surprise, and seemed suspicious of something. Then she looked at my mother. Even now, remembering that moment sends a chill through me. "Goodness, Clusa, this is so strange. Your grandson looks exactly like Wagner did when he was little. There is no denying it. I am amazed. It is as if I am looking at Wagner when he was 5 or 6 years old." My mother immediately turned her eyes toward me. I am certain she noticed how disturbed I was. She stared at me with wide eyes. I must have turned pale because I felt my face go cold in an instant. Fortunately, my mother said nothing at that moment. But my aunt continued talking about the resemblance, making me even more nervous. The visit ended, but the matter did not. As soon as Aunt Nide left, my mother came to speak with me. Naturally, she wanted to talk about Gabriel and Wagner. "It was strange hearing Nide say all those things, wasn't it? She said Gabriel looks exactly like Wagner did as a child. What do you have to say about that, Cristina?" I did not know what to answer. My God, what a situation. My mother was clearly suspicious. Aunt Nade had not made only one quick comment. She had repeatedly insisted on the resemblance, and my mother had heard every word. Now she wanted an explanation from me. You know when a question sounds more like an accusation. That was exactly how it felt. I could not speak. My mother noticed that I was nervous and agitated. Cristina, you are not hiding something from me, are you? Answer me. Does Nade's son have anything to do with Gabriel? Of course not, Mom. My God, where did you get that idea? You know exactly where I got it. I started doing the math. You became pregnant soon after we returned from Bandeirantes. I also remember very well that you and Nade's son were always together. Now tell me the truth. What does your cousin have to do with Gabriel? I had never felt so trapped or so unsure of what to do. I continued to deny everything. I insisted on the same story I had told from the beginning, but my mother did not believe me. I knew her too well. Even after Aunt Nede had gone, my mother continued to pressure me. Eventually, I no longer had the strength to keep denying it. After crying for a long time and facing question after question, I could no longer maintain the lie. I put all my cards on the table and told her the truth. My mother was stunned. Although she had already suspected it and had done the math, as she said, she became furious when I confirmed everything. My God, what have you done, girl? You could not have hidden this from us? That young man had the right to know and he was your son's father. In fact, he also had the responsibility to acknowledge the child and help you. Besides saying all of that, my mother began remembering every difficulty we had faced during my pregnancy, including our financial struggles and the problems during the first months after Gabriel was born. Then she added, Gabriel also has the right to know who his biological father is. Don't you think? You were very selfish, my daughter. You thought only about yourself. Only I know everything I had to face and do to help you. I replied that my son already had a father. I told her that Bernardo loved him and had offered to legally register him as his own. But my mother did not accept that as a justification. Do you know what I think? You should tell everyone the truth, including your husband. Because one day, even if it takes years, the truth will come out. And when it does, I would not want to be in your place. I begged her not to tell anyone, especially not my husband. I was terrified of how Bernardo might react. I did not want him to discover that I had hidden the truth. In reality, I had lied when I told him about a stranger who disappeared after learning about the pregnancy. I imagined Bernardo discovering everything and deciding to leave me. He loved me. I knew that. He had always been understanding. Even so, I was afraid that I would lose him when he discovered the lie I had maintained for so long. I was also certain he would not like seeing another man appear at our home to claim paternity of Gabriel, a boy Bernardo already considered his own son and wanted to legally adopt. And that man was not a stranger. He was my cousin. If Wagner discovered the truth, he might want to acknowledge Gabriel and become part of his life. He might begin visiting our home and interfering with our routine. It would cause enormous turmoil. My marriage could face a terrible storm. I had no doubt about that. My greatest fear was that Bernardo would lose his trust in me, that the entire situation would damage our relationship, and that in the end, he would decide to leave. That was why I begged my mother, "For the love of God, Mom, Everything is finally going well. Please stay silent. Do not tell anyone. I know I may not even have the right to ask this of you, but every night I pray that God will not allow this story to come to light. I know I was the person most at fault in the entire story. I made mistakes from the very beginning. I am the one responsible for hiding the truth from everyone. But now I ask myself, what is the point of reopening something that has remained locked away for so long? Would it only disrupt my life and perhaps destroy my marriage? Leave everything as it is, Mom. For the love of God, do not tell anyone. Everyone is happy. Me, my husband, and Gabriel. My second child is about to be born, and my first child already has someone who loves him as a father. There is no reason to change anything. Wagner knows nothing, and perhaps it is better that he never knows. He is living his own life, dating and meeting other people. Why bring all of this back if everyone is happy? That was the question I could not stop asking myself. Would revealing the truth be worth the risk of destroying everything we had built?